Can I start with a story? Okay, family vacay 2016, Disney World. The fireworks were magical, the princesses were magical, the churros were expensive. Oh, but the best souvenir that I got? No, it wasn't my giant Mickey ear collection, and it wasn't this awesome picture of my family going 0 to 60 on rock and roller coaster. It was the tooth that my sister, Miriam, lost and left in my arm when she bit me on Expedition Everest. Okay, look, I was just minding my own business. Okay, maybe I told her that the Yeti robot was alive and was going to eat her, when all of a sudden, chomp! That was 8 years ago, and I still remember it like it was yesterday. And what's even more wild? You're all more likely to remember it now, too. As cognitive psychologist Jerome Bruner explains, information conveyed through a story, a meaningful series of events, fact or fiction, spoken or written, is 22 times more memorable than facts and figures alone. And yet, as Daryl West of the Brookings Institution warns, today, the weaponization of stories has created a toxic story ecosystem that greatly contributes to polarization and extremism. Let's tell that story by first examining how stories shape our brains and our behavior, then exploring how certain stories are silenced, before finally addressing the implications of weaponizing stories. For the rest of that Disney World trip, my mom had to carry Miriam's baby tooth with her in a Ziploc bag because Miriam only lost half the tooth. The other half of it was still in her mouth. And similar to that half tooth, fully buried in my arm, stories have a way of sticking in our brains. As the Neuroleadership Institute explains in 2022, when we see, hear, or read a story, neurons in our brain fire throughout the frontal cortex and synchronize with the brainwaves of the storytellers. This is a process known as neural coupling, or mirroring. It's the reason why you may remember my sister's name, Miriam, or her missing tooth, and when I told you about the bite marks on my arm, you might have felt my pain. Literally, because as neuroscientist Paul Zak has discovered, when we take in an emotional story, our brains release oxytocin, a chemical responsible for empathy, leading to positive changes in our behaviors. Take the students at Southern New Hampshire University, who felt an increase in engagement when their professor, Jeanne Hughes, increased her storytelling. Or the patients in a 2022 American Association for Cancer Research study, who, after hearing a story about someone diagnosed with HPV-related cancer, increased their vaccination rates from 53% to 73%. Emotional stories can even change juries' minds, such as in the landmark 1963 Gideon versus Wainwright case. After being found guilty in his first trial, a powerful story humanizing Clarence Gideon's struggle to afford an attorney overturned the case. And honestly, I wish I had 10 more minutes to share his story with you, because his chance to share his story is in large part why everyone is afforded a public attorney today. When we got back from that Disney World trip, my sister's teeth started disintegrating. I'm not kidding. Don't worry, she's fine now. But just like she had to dig out her tooth fragments, we have to dig into the past. Because throughout history, stories have been weaponized through their silencing. 210 BC. Chinese Emperor Qi Huangdi burned all the books in his kingdom that interfered with his ideal version of history. 1748 and beyond. Female authors faced harsh criticism, disguised their identities using male pen names, or, in many cases, were barred from publishing their stories altogether. 1830. The Indian Removal Act separated communities and prioritized the Western written word, leading to a severance in oral storytelling traditions. And 1933. Massive bonfires throughout Nazi Germany destroyed thousands of stories by Jewish authors. And still, today, there are coordinated efforts to remove hundreds of stories from our schools. According to the International Relations Review, these stories include everything from classic lit, like The Diary of Anne Frank, which has been banned in schools in Texas, Alabama, Virginia, and Florida, to contemporary lit, like
Genderqueer, a memoir. Despite winning the Stonewall Honor Book Award, it is censored in 32 states, including right here in Iowa, according to the Capital Research Center. Author Misty Wilson writes with the School Library Journal in 2022 that when stories are weaponized in this way, we are not just banning access. We are banning gateways to conversation and community, and ultimately, preventing those vital, neural connections. And yet, our insatiable appetite for stories remains. But when the stories we need are banned, blocked, and buried, we are left to feed on the stories we are sold. Because it's not just content, it's chemistry. Oh, remember that chemical from earlier, oxytocin? Well, as Ben Chinoy explains in his article with Duke, it's actually oxytocin that keeps us coming back for more. And, quote, give stories many of the properties of addictive drugs. And while we can get hooked on positive stories, it's the negative ones that are particularly potent. It's why my story started with princesses and fireworks, but I knew the bite marks would leave a lasting impression. It's what Roxanne Cristalli with the Fletcher Forum of World Affairs coins: conflict, voyeurism, or the allure of negativity. Because a story is far more destructive when sowing seeds of distrust and division. Journalist George Monbiot points out that stories equal power. And those wishing to take power have two options, and they use both: attack the opposing story and promote their own. As the Committee to Protect Journalists reported just this week, 86 journalists have been arrested, 113 injured, and 186 killed as a result of the Israel-Hamas war, making this the deadliest time for those seeking to share stories in the last 30 years. And here in the United States, the Trump administration is trying to dictate who gets to tell stories and who gets to hear them. Beyond handpicking the White House press pool, NPR announced just last month that executive orders to defund NPR and PBS would directly impact over 1,000 radio stations. And the truth is that the fallout of these cuts remains untold. Although, as one local station director, Tammy Graham, warns, we live in a literal news desert. In some places, our stories are the only connections people have to what is happening. At the same time, the pervasiveness of false and negative stories continues to fuel political narratives, especially during election cycles, where stories of Jewish space lasers, Pizzagate, or Springfield, Ohio run rampant throughout right-wing media. But the left side of the aisle is far from immune, with stories of Don Jr.'s drug use, Iowa Senator Joni Ernst's emails, or the couch, perpetuated by the Democratic Party. I mean, look no further than the ongoing LA protests. The story from MSNBC: demonstrators protest peacefully. While the story from Fox: troops arrive as violent riots erupt. Both true, yet incomplete. The reality is clear. Stories are unifying. It is simply a matter of what we are uniting. Is it the most altruistic, loving parts of humanity, or the darkest areas of deceit and destruction? Because as Monbiot concludes, a string of facts, however well attested, cannot dislodge a powerful story. Today, you heard more than just facts. You heard a story. Once upon a time, stories were a tool for positive social change. They molded young minds, bolstered our health, and protected our freedoms. But when our stories were silenced, they lost their strength. When they were weaponized and manipulated, they amplified vitriolic voices. But now, whether for power or pride, creation or destruction, let's remember that our words, our voices, our stories carry immense power, and we hold the pen to write the next chapter. And that's something we can all sink our teeth into.